5. Healthy fruits that actually reduce longevity. After 60, stop eating 3 immediately. Let me ask you something uncomfortable but important. What if the food that makes you feel responsible is quietly wearing you down? What if the fruit you eat every morning, the one you're convinced is healthy, is actually doing the opposite of what you intended? Not because it's rotten, not because it's fast food, but because your body at 65, 70, or 75 simply can't process it the way it once did. The truth is, after 60, some fruits that were once helpful may now be harmful. That's what Linda Hayes discovered, and it changed everything about how she looked at her health. Linda lived in a warm, slow-moving suburb in central Florida, surrounded by palm trees and screened-in porches. She was 67, retired, and proud of how she had handled her transition into older age. Her late husband had always said she was sharp as a tack, and she made sure to keep it that way, walking every morning, doing gentle yoga twice a week, and keeping a carefully balanced diet. Every morning without fail, she'd build a beautiful fruit bowl: bananas, grapes, mangoes, a bit of pineapple, maybe a few dried cranberries. Her daughter had once called it Instagram worthy, and Linda had smiled satisfied. It wasn't just pretty, it was healthy, or so she believed. But over time, small things began to change. She started waking up feeling off, a little more sluggish, a little less clear. Some days, she'd get dizzy standing from the couch. Other days, her heart felt like it was racing, even though she hadn't moved. Her sleep, once steady and dependable, had become frustratingly light. And though she was eating right, her recent checkups had been concerning. Her fasting glucose had crept up. Her blood pressure was edging toward hypertension. Her doctor mentioned it might be time to consider some gentle medication. Linda was stunned. Didn't smoke. She didn't drink. She wasn't eating processed foods. Why was her body failing her? Still, she brushed it off. Maybe it was just the weather, or stress, or aging. But somewhere deep inside, something didn't sit right. One evening, while searching for recipes online, Linda clicked on a video she normally would have skipped. Its title read, "5 Healthy Fruits That Are Actually Dangerous After 60. Her instinct was to laugh, but then something made her pause. Curiosity, maybe, or desperation. So she clicked play. What she saw shook her. The video walked through fruits she ate every day: grapes, bananas, pineapple, mangoes, and explained how each one could spike blood sugar in older adults, cause hidden inflammation, and even interfere with heart medications. It talked about glycemic load, natural fructose overload, and how the liver's ability to process sugar declines with age. It explained how bananas, especially ripe ones, acted like candy in the bloodstream, and how dried fruits were concentrated sugar bombs. Linda didn't move. Her entire kitchen, the fruit bowls, the smoothie ingredients, the snacks she believed were her healthy choices, suddenly felt like strangers. Or worse, saboteurs. She turned off the video and stared at the wooden bowl in the center of her counter. A banana rested on top of a bunch of red grapes, both glistening in the afternoon sun. She didn't eat that night. She didn't even make tea. She sat in the dark, her mind racing with questions. How long had she been hurting herself without knowing? How many times had she praised her routine, proud that she was doing everything right, while her numbers climbed higher and her body grew weaker? The next morning, for the first time in years, She didn't make a fruit bowl. Instead, she poured a cup of black coffee and sat quietly, staring out the window. The birds moved through the garden as usual. But Linda was different. She felt betrayed, not by anyone else, but by her own assumptions. She had followed the rules. She had believed in healthy without questioning what that meant at her age. So she did something she hadn't done in decades. She grabbed a yellow notepad, pulled out a pen, and wrote down 5 fruits. The ones she just learned were high risk. After 60, grapes, bananas, pineapple, mango, dried cranberries. Then she drew a red line through each one. That small act wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful because it marked the beginning of something Linda hadn't felt in a long time at control. She wasn't going to keep doing what she'd always done. She was going to learn, adjust, listen. And most of all, she was going to stop assuming that something labeled healthy was healthy for her. As the sun rose higher, she grabbed her car keys and drove to the local co-op. This time, she skipped the usual suspects and filled her cart with blueberries, pears, kiwi, and blackberries. She wasn't cutting fruit out of her life. She was just choosing differently. Because after 60, the goal isn't to eat like you're 30. It's to eat like you want to live to 90. And if that means saying goodbye to a few healthy habits that no longer serve you, so be it. If you've been starting your days with the same fruit bowl for years and you've noticed something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't wait for your doctor to mention medication. Start by asking one simple question. Is this helping me or just a habit I've never questioned? You might be surprised what your body's been trying to tell you all along. Let your next bite be smarter than your last. Because after 60, the right fruit can keep you strong, but the wrong one can quietly wear you down. Are you ready to find out which one you need to stop today? The kitchen felt different now. Linda stood in front of the same fruit bowl she'd once admired each morning, only now she saw it not as nourishment, but as a question. What else had she been wrong about? She reached for the bananas. Their familiar yellow skins looked innocent, even cheerful. She had eaten one nearly every morning for decades. It was automatic, easy on the stomach, easy to justify. But now that she knew what a ripe banana could do to her blood sugar at her age, she hesitated. She peeled one slowly and stared at it. She wasn't angry at the fruit. She was angry that no one had told her that the same banana that gave her energy at 30 might be quietly exhausting her body at 67. She didn't eat it. Not this time. Instead, she made a new plan. She was going to track what her body did, not just what she felt. Linda ordered a home glucose monitor. Nothing fancy, just something that could show her what was actually happening after each meal. If certain fruits were truly triggering crashes or inflammation, she wanted to see it for herself. 3 days later, the kit arrived. She pricked her finger carefully, checked her fasting number. It was slightly high, nothing alarming, but just enough to justify the doctor's concern. That morning, she tested her usual fruit bowl: banana, pineapple, grapes. 1 hour after eating, her blood sugar jumped nearly 50 points. She didn't feel it right away, but by late morning, the familiar fatigue had crept in. Her eyelids were heavy, her focus scattered. The spike had done its work. She tested again the next morning, this time a bowl of blueberries, half a pear, and a few slices of kiwi. The results: barely a bump, smooth, calm. She felt clear, steady, even energized. That was the moment it became real. Not a theory, not a trend, a truth. Her body wasn't broken. It wasn't failing. It was reacting appropriately to what it was being fed. She began logging everything. Not just the numbers, but the feelings after each meal. Lightness, fog, clarity, nausea, energy. It all went in the journal. She wasn't dieting. She was listening. And the more she listened, the more her habits began to shift. Naturally, not forcefully. And were the tropical fruits and the dried apricots she used to toss into salads. Instead, her fridge filled with berries, melons, and citrus in moderation. Her counter featured pears instead of bananas. Even her morning tea changed no honey anymore, just lemon and warmth. But something else was shifting too. Something Linda didn't expect. She felt proud. Not because she'd lost weight or followed a rule, but because for the first time in years, she had agency. She wasn't drifting into old age, waiting for doctors to adjust her pills. She was waking up and deciding what helps me today, what hurts me today. And she acted accordingly. Her sleep improved. No more 3 a.m. tossing and turning. No more morning bloat or afternoon brain fog. She noticed her skin looked less sallow in the mirror. Her posture even improved slightly. Less slouching. More breath. It wasn't magic. It was subtraction. Taking away the things that quietly drained her, replacing them with choices that respected the biology of a 67-year-old body, not the memories of a 40-year-old lifestyle. And it started with a single piece of fruit. A few days later, while out shopping, she ran into an old friend from her yoga class, Linda. "You look rested," the woman said, adjusting her sunglasses. "Are you doing something different?" Linda hesitated. She didn't want to sound preachy, but this wasn't a fad. It wasn't a diet. It was simply information. "I stopped eating what I assumed was healthy," she said gently. "Turns out, not every fruit loves you back after 60. They both laughed. But it wasn't a joke, because Linda now understood something no nutrition label would ever tell you. Healthy isn't what looks good on a plate. Healthy is what leaves you feeling stronger. 2 hours later, she went home that day, placed her fruit on the counter, and wrote a small note to herself with a magnet. "Does this help me thrive, or just feel familiar?" That one question became her compass. And every time she reached for something, whether a pear, a plum, or yes, even the occasional slice of banana, she asked it again. Because real health isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. And after 60, every bite matters more than it used to. Gusto, not because you're fragile, but because you finally know what your body's been trying to say. All along, Linda wasn't afraid of fruit. She was just done being fooled by the wrong ones. If you've ever felt tired after a healthy breakfast, or noticed your energy drop after the same fruit you've eaten for years, maybe it's time to ask the same thing. Linda did. Is this food still working for me? Or am I just stuck in an old story? You don't need to give everything up, but you might just need to start over with what your body needs now, not what it needed then Linda hadn't expected it to hurt. She had removed the grapes, replaced the pineapple, put the bananas on hold. She was adjusting well. Her blood sugar was better. Her sleep was deeper. She was doing the right thing by every measurable standard. But then it happened. One quiet morning, as she stood in the grocery store. Produce aisle, she saw them. Perfectly yellow bananas, stacked in tall bunches, soft but firm, just ripe enough. And without warning, a lump rose in her throat. She hadn't eaten one in weeks. And until now, she hadn't really missed them. But something about seeing them again alone in public, unguarded, triggered a wave she didn't see coming. It wasn't about the sugar, or the glycemic index, or insulin spikes. It was about him. Her husband Michael used to eat a banana every morning. He'd slice it in half and hand her the other, placing it silently next to her mug. No words, just a smile. They did that for 22 years. After he passed, Linda had kept the ritual alive. For years, she peeled a banana every morning, not because of potassium, but because of memory. And now, she'd let it go, without even realizing what it symbolized. She stood frozen in that grocery aisle, hand on the cart, blinking fast. It wasn't about the fruit. It was about the grief, hiding underneath it. She left without buying anything. At home, the silence felt louder than usual. The kitchen didn't feel like hers. The fridge was full of berries and pears and science-backed choices, but it didn't feel like home, not today. She made tea, sat down, and for the first time since her diagnosis, she felt a familiar tightness in her chest, not from blood pressure, but from sadness, a sense of betrayal. She had spent her whole life trying to do things right, take care of others, show up, age gracefully. And now, here she was at 67, feeling like everything she'd once trusted. Food, routine memory, had turned on her. She didn't want to cry, but she did. Grief is sneaky that way. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask for permission. It arrives when you're holding a banana in aisle 3. After a while, she stood up, wiped her face, and pulled open the kitchen drawer where she kept Michael's old recipe cards. They were simple: chicken stew, apple pie, summer lemonade, but tucked in the back was something she hadn't seen in years, his handwriting on a torn envelope barely legible. Just because you've done something for a long time doesn't mean it still serves you. She stared at it. She didn't remember when he'd written that, but she knew why it mattered now. Maybe it was okay to mourn what no longer worked. Maybe part of healing wasn't just changing habits, but honoring what those habits once meant. She didn't need to pretend the banana was the enemy. It had been a companion for decades. It had served her well for a season. And now that season was over. That night, she wrote something new in her journal. I'm not giving up the past. I'm giving my future more room to grow. She folded the page gently and placed it inside Michael's old recipe box. The next day, Linda woke up early, stood at the counter and quietly peeled a kiwi, then a pear. She sliced them slowly, neatly, placing them into her small white bowl. The banana sat untouched in the corner, not out of fear, but out of peace. She had nothing to prove, only something to preserve her clarity, her energy, her life. When she sat down to eat, It wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about following a rule. It was about choosing a new ritual, one that honored her past while protecting her future. A few weeks later, she found herself walking through that same grocery store. The bananas were still there. She smiled this time. She wasn't angry. She wasn't tempted. She was free. Because once you understand what's truly serving you and what's quietly subtracting from you, you don't need to fight anymore. You just choose differently. If you've ever felt a quiet sadness, letting go of something you thought was good for you, this grief is not weakness. It's wisdom, learning to let go. And healing isn't just what you add. It's also what you release with grace. You don't have to give up memories to build a longer, stronger life. You just have to decide which ones belong on your plate and which ones belong in your heart. Are you willing to let go of one habit today, not out of guilt, but out of love for who you're still becoming? That's where real change begins. Not with the food itself, but with the quiet decision to stop repeating what no longer serves you. It's funny how clarity doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in silence, in the way your body finally says thank you. Linda had stopped waiting for miracles. She no longer looked for drastic overnight changes or dramatic before and after moments. She simply got up each morning, walked barefoot to the kitchen, and prepared what she now called her quiet breakfast. No bananas, no dried mango, no sugary grapes, just a small bowl of sliced pear, a handful of blueberries, and a few tangy raspberries. Sometimes she added kiwi for a little brightness. The difference was subtle but steady. Her body felt lighter, not in pounds, but in resistance. There was less bloating. Her energy no longer collapsed after breakfast. Her hands, once stiff in the morning, moved more freely. And when she caught her reflection in the mirror one afternoon, she was surprised by what she saw. Not youth, vitality. Her eyes were clearer. The tension in her forehead had softened. Her skin even looked less dull. There was no cream or supplement to credit. It was the slow, daily undoing of inflammation, brought on not by a pill, but by choosing better fruit. More than her body, it was Linda's relationship with food that had transformed. She no longer thought in labels: good, bad, clean, cheat. She thought in questions. Does this give me energy? Does this slow me down? Does this feel respectful to the woman I am now? And slowly, her entire kitchen began to reflect that shift. She swapped the fruit basket on her counter for a smaller ceramic dish, one that only held what she planned to eat that day. She placed a little sticky note inside the cupboard where she used to keep trail mix and dried fruit. It read, "Listen before you reach." One morning, her neighbor Carol came over for coffee. They sat on the back porch, sun on their shoulders, a bowl of kiwi and blackberries between them. "I've been so tired lately," Carol said, stirring her tea. "I eat well, fruit, every morning, granola, even gave up soda." Linda nodded. She didn't jump to correct her. She waited. "What kind of fruit?" she asked gently. "Banana grapes. Sometimes canned peaches." Linda smiled soft and warm. That's what I used to eat too. Carol raised an eyebrow. And now I started asking my body what worked. Turns out it was trying to tell me all along. I just wasn't listening. They didn't talk science. They didn't debate glycemic indexes. They just ate berries together and let the silence do the rest. That night, Linda journaled something new, pieces when your food doesn't fight you anymore. And she meant it. She no longer feared aging. She feared disconnection from her own signals, from what her body had been whispering all these years. The more she removed what didn't serve her, the more clearly she could hear those whispers, and they weren't begging for perfection. They were just asking for honesty. There were still days she felt tired, still nights she woke at 3 a.m., but they were fewer, softer. Her recovery time was better, her cravings less urgent, and she felt deep in her bones that she was no longer drifting. She was directing. It wasn't about fruit. Not really. It was about awareness. It was about respecting the season you're in, not clinging to the season you miss. On her fridge, next to a photo of her husband in their younger years, Linda taped a new note. Eat like your body matters, because it still does. The picture made her smile, not from nostalgia, but from gratitude, because the woman in that photo didn't know what she knows now. And the woman standing in front of it at 67 was stronger because of it. A few days later, she stopped by the farmer's market and picked out a new fruit to try papaya. She hadn't eaten it in years. She sliced it thin, paired it with lime, and watched how her body responded. The next morning, she added it to the rotation. No guilt, no fanfare. Just another quiet choice in a life she was finally living on purpose. If you've ever felt like your food choices are running on autopilot, or if you've been following the same habits for years without asking if they still serve you, maybe this is your moment. Maybe today is the day you step off the script and write something better. Not because you're broken, but because you're finally ready to partner with your body, not push against it. And sometimes all that takes is changing what goes in your bowl. It had been 90 days since Linda changed her mornings. 90 quiet, thoughtful mornings. No banana slices. No automatic handfuls of grapes. No colorful fruit smoothies masked in hidden sugar. Instead, she had eaten with intention, measured, tuned in. She had peeled kiwi, sliced pears, watched raspberries tumble into a white bowl with soft reverence. Her breakfast table no longer looked like a magazine cover, but her body had never felt more real. This time, she walked into her doctor's office with a steady gait and calm breath. The same nurse, the same scale, the same tight blood pressure cuff. But Linda was not the same. Her numbers were better, measurably, undeniably better. Blood pressure, once climbing, now hovered in the healthy range. Her fasting glucose stabilized. She hadn't dropped weight dramatically, but she had dropped something more important, the constant sense that she was slipping slowly, quietly into decline. Her doctor flipped through her chart, eyes narrowing in pleasant surprise. "You made adjustments," she said. Linda nodded. I stopped trusting what I was told was healthy, and I started trusting how I felt. The doctor smiled. That's what I wish more patients would do. Linda didn't feel pride in that moment. She felt alignment. She hadn't followed a strict plan. She joined a program. She hadn't cut out all sugar, gone keto, or fasted until noon. She had simply chosen to listen and to believe what her body was trying to say. And what it had said was clear. Some fruits, though, once beneficial, had become burdens. She hadn't been aging poorly. She had been eating without adapting. She walked out of the office that day, not with a prescription, but with relief. At home, she placed her updated grocery list on the fridge. Not a diet, not a rule book. Just 5 fruits her body had thanked her for. Blueberries, kiwi, raspberries, pears, cantaloupe, simple, safe, supportive. And next to the list, she taped a new reminder. My body is aging, but it is not fragile. It is wise, and it wants to help me. That afternoon, she met her daughter, Marissa, for lunch. They sat in a quiet cafe, sunlight sliding in through the windows. You seem more you, Marissa said after their salads arrived. It's hard to explain. Linda just smiled. I think I finally stopped fighting my body and started listening. They talked about small things. The garden, old friends' recipes. But something unspoken passed between them too. A kind of reassurance that aging wasn't taking Linda away. It was in some strange way bringing her back to herself. Later that night, Linda poured herself a cup of tea, sliced half a pear, and sat by the window with the lights off. The moon hung full and soft in the sky. The house was quiet, and so was her mind. She thought about the woman she was 3 months ago. How certain she'd been that her fruit bowl was her badge of discipline. How confused and defeated she'd felt when her numbers began to rise. How betrayed she felt, standing in the grocery aisle that day. And now, she didn't feel betrayed. She felt awake. It hadn't been about fruit, really. It had been about permission to rethink, to re-evaluate, to release old routines and build new rituals, not because she had to, but because she was allowed to. That was the part no one talked about. How after 60, you're still allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to say, this used to work for me. It doesn't anymore. You're allowed to age with new information, new patterns, new power. Linda closed her eyes and whispered to the quiet kitchen. Thank you, not to the fruit, but to herself. To the woman who had the courage to stop doing what was familiar and start doing what felt right. If you're sitting with a bowl of fruit each morning, because you always have, I invite you to pause. Not with guilt, not with fear. Just ask, is this feeding who I was or who I still want to become? Your answer might be small, or it might change everything. You don't need to give up fruit. You don't need to fear food. You just need to know that not all healthy is healthy for you. Not anymore. So try what Linda did. Change one fruit. Track how you feel. Let your body speak, and this time really listen. If her story resonated with you, don't scroll past it. Comment below. I'm ready to eat for the future, because aging is not about shrinking. It's about refining. And the strongest thing you can do today might just be putting the right fruit in your bowl.